This is big. How close did we just come to a new war in the Middle East? And also, are we even out of the woods yet? Right, that's what's being asked as the protests that have shaken Iran for weeks now may be coming to an end. And the horror that's unfolded there, it's only become more clear. Right, Iranian authorities, they've imposed a near total communications blackout of the entire country, but the information that has trickled out, it's painted a picture of a truly brutal crackdown. We've got a lot of witnesses reporting that the government forces have fired indiscriminately on unarmed protesters, and videos checked by news outlets appearing to back that up. The Washington Post, for example, verified clips that showed security forces firing directly into crowds of protesters in at least 6 different cities across the country. And then with all that, estimates of the total number killed reportedly range from under 2,000 to more than 12,000. Or with the US-based group Human Rights Activists in Iran, which has been one of the most widely cited sources, most recently putting that its confirmed overall death toll is 2,615, saying that 882 additional deaths remain under investigation. And then as far as those arrested, they're reporting that more than 18,000 people have been arrested. It's a sign of just how massive the crackdown's been. Even the government has taken the unusual step of acknowledging the huge number of casualties. Though they emphasize the deaths of security services and otherwise try to cast the dead as victims of violent rioters rather than the state, and also accusing the United States and Israel of somehow being behind the protests. But also a big part of this is that you've seen Trump repeatedly threatening to intervene. And on Tuesday, you had Trump meeting with senior officials at the White House to discuss options, with CIA Director John Ratcliffe reportedly sharing information with Trump about the estimated death toll and also showing the president videos of bodies in the streets and protesters being hanged in the past. And so then you had Trump saying in an interview airing that evening that the United States would take very strong action in Iran if they were to hang protesters.
And when they start killing thousands of people, and now you're telling me about hanging, we'll see how that works out for them. It's not going to work out good.
But then, despite that, on Wednesday morning, you had Iran's chief justice calling for speedy trials and executions of what he called rioters and added, those elements who beheaded people in the streets or burned people alive must be tried and punished as quickly as possible. And adding, if we don't do it fast, it won't have the same impact. And so then with that, a protester by the name of Irfan Sultani, he's believed to have been the first Iranian protester sentenced to death since the current unrest began, and he was widely expected to be executed on Wednesday. Right, and that is, you also reportedly had a senior Iranian official telling countries hosting American military bases in the region that they would attack them in the event of a US strike. And actually, that wouldn't be the first time, right? Iran actually launched missiles at a US base just last summer after Trump ordered those strikes on its nuclear facilities. Though I'll say that strike was widely seen as just symbolic, with Iran giving a warning ahead of time, a US Patriot air defense battery shooting down almost all of the incoming missiles, and most American personnel having been temporarily moved from the base anyways. And something that was notable here is that this time around, we saw the Pentagon taking very similar precautions, where some personnel at a key US military base on Qatari soil were advised to evacuate. The US Embassy in Kuwait, they ordered its personnel to temporarily stop going to many military bases on its territory. Plus, the Pentagon apparently placed long-range bombers in the United States on alert for potential secondary strikes. And coincidentally, Iran closes airspace without explanation, with one person described as a Western military official telling Reuters at the time, all the signals are that a US attack is imminent. Although he added, that is also how this administration behaves to keep everyone on their toes. Unpredictability is part of the strategy. And also with that, even as, it seemed on one hand that the conflict was inevitable, there was more happening. Sultani's family, they were told that the execution had been postponed. And you had the Iranian foreign minister going on Fox News and saying there was no plan to execute people for participating in the protests, and saying
hanging is out of the question.
Them also urging the United States to engage in diplomacy, saying it's much better than war. And then on the flip side, you had Trump telling reporters at the White House that he had received assurances from very important sources on the other side that Iran would not execute demonstrators, and added,
we've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping. It's stopped. It's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that on good authority.
Now with that, I'll say, when asked about whether military action had been taken off the table, he said, we're going to watch it and see what the process is. But still, you had one senior US military official telling the New York Times that Trump's comments served as an off-ramp. Right? And the Pentagon started preparing to stand down forces and allow troops to return to base. Iran also reopened its airspace, although some European airlines have reportedly continued avoiding it just as a precaution. Right? And you also had Iran's president saying that the government is trying to address some of the economic problems that led to the initial protests. And you even had the Iranian judiciary suddenly claiming that Sultani had not been sentenced to death at all, and adding that he was convicted, and quote, the punishment according to the law will be imprisonment, as the death penalty does not exist for such charges. But of course, that's the guy from a government that's believed to have taken the lives of thousands of people this month and executed more than 1,500 last year alone. Now, even if it's true that people aren't being killed anymore, that doesn't mean that they're not being punished. Right? Iranian state media has reportedly kept announcing waves of arrests by authorities, and those being taken in being described as terrorists. Right? And there are signs that the crackdown may have done its job, with one foreign diplomat telling the Washington Post that the streets seem to be back to normal, and adding, "I cannot believe that only a few days ago people were taking to the streets. This speaks to the severity of the crackdown by the regime. The fear factor has gained the upper hand over people's urge and desire for change." Though with that, he also said it is difficult to assess at this point whether the latest uprising was only a prelude to another big wave or the end of the story. And so we'll have to see what happens in Iran, but also with the United States and the rest of the international community. An emergency UN Security Council meeting was scheduled today to discuss Iran at the request of the United States. Foreign ministers from the G7 said that they were ready to impose additional restrictive measures on Iran over its handling of the protests, likely referring to sanctions. Also, the EU looks set to impose new sanctions, and actually, the United States has now done so, announcing them today and saying that they target the architects of the crackdown. But of course, one of the big questions is that it, or could we still see some sort of military action? And the answer is, who really knows? I mean, just think about this summer. You had Israel launching major strikes against Iran, and Trump posted on social media, "We remain committed to a diplomatic solution on the Iran nuclear issue," saying, "My entire administration has been directed to negotiate with Iran." But then, less than 10 days later, he himself authorized major strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, including one using the United States' 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs that have never been used in combat before. Now, of course, there was a lot of crazy rhetoric in between all that, where he appeared much more open to military intervention, but what seems clear here is that Trump is very happy to change his mind at any time. And in the here and now, the lack of military action so far, that may be partly explainable by other factors than him being against the idea. Reportedly, both Israeli and Arab officials have urged him not to attack Iran right now, and the actual options available to him right now may have been limited because of the military buildup in the Caribbean. The US actually hasn't had an aircraft carrier near the Middle East since it got sent to support the campaign against Venezuela. If an attack on Iran, it spirals into a larger military conflict, there's no way of getting it back to the region quickly. Though I will say very notably, the Pentagon's now reportedly moving the aircraft carrier that's been stationed in the South China Sea to the Middle East.